So we just saw, for example, the catastrophic regional flooding in Pakistan. 30 million people displaced from their homes, a third of the country underwater. Now, this is a country that's already under tremendous stress, very high poverty levels. But obviously that kind of disruption at that scale is just pushing people further and further down and further into poverty. That said, if we don't put our shoulder to the wheel, then it's going to get hotter than 2 degrees C. And every tenth of a degree hotter means more misery, more suffering, more climate refugees.
Climate activist Greta Thunberg detained while protesting in a western German village that's...
The American President Joe Biden has approved a major oil and gas drilling project in Alaska that faced strong opposition from environmental activists.
This morning, where it has been a month since the train derailment that has changed this community forever. As more testing is being done, the more questions are being asked by the community.
Yeah. The work that we are going to do collectively or not do together over the next 10, 20, 30 years is going to profoundly shape the future course of human history, and not just for, our kids and their grandkids and every creature that is going to be on the face of this planet from now until the end of time.
These moments are just a fraction of our beautiful world. Someday it'll be too late. The time is now. The time is now. The time is now.
There's no meaningful governmental action, right? In other words, all the action that we see are band-aids that are meant to quiet dissent and to appease people. But there's a very strong collaboration between governments and industry, such that the science that industry supports or allows to get out, which is very partial to say the least, then becomes used by governments to legitimate practices that, again, feed back into profits for corporations, then feed back into politicians who are reelected. So it's a vicious cycle. And the only way to, in my mind, to stop that vicious cycle is mass resistance.
So money explains why it took us 30 years to get here, particularly in the United States. But now we're beginning to see significant mobilization of finance, industry behind the task of decarbonization, and that's a good thing. The root causes of the climate crisis are burning coal and natural gas in power plants and gasoline in automobiles. We recognized that this was a problem a long time ago, certainly by the late 70s and early 80s. And so at that time, we were highly dependent on those sources. But if we had pivoted earlier in accord with what scientists were telling us, we could have solved the problem by now.
Her name is Naomi Oreskes, and she has a new book out that ties the climate crisis to the market economy. When people started wondering about this tremendous spike in cancer deaths, in lung cancer, the tobacco companies, because they're guarding their profit, had done all these studies, right? They'd done the science. And so too had the oil companies done the science. And what they found they didn't like. And so they suppressed it. And then they came out and said, well, the science is still uncertain. They knew perfectly well the science was rock solid.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But they want to stall. And stall and stall and stall. Mm-hmm. And so the public is not getting the information that it needs. Or it's getting a kind of liberal, this is horrible, but it's not that bad because we could do these other things.
On a more positive note, on Wednesday, December 13th, 2023, according to the Washington Post climate coverage, 200 nations agreed at the 2023 UN Climate Change Conference, or COP28, to transition away from fossil fuels and achieve net zero emissions by 2050. This is the first time a global climate deal has called to curb fossil fuel usage.